Good morning, Dan and Amy, and spoke with Andy No, a good journalist, Portland-based, also with Post Millennial now, and wanted to get his perspective because he's been doing some good reporting since January 6th, including on January 6th, noting something that not too many others in the press corps nationally have noted, that while the indefensible rioting that occurred on the inside the Capitol and around the Capitol was going on, so was Antifa rioting in Portland. That continues. And Antifa's ascendance continues generally. Turns out it's not just an idea of President Biden. It's a little bit more than that. Andy No offered this review.
Yeah, my response to the brazen attack at the Capitol Hill siege last week is the same response that I had throughout 2020 when rioters in my home city of Portland and nearby in Seattle actually tried to break into federal property. In the case of Portland, it was thousands of people for weeks and weeks trying to burn down the federal courthouse in downtown. And when the Trump administration sent in federal law enforcement to help protect that facility, they were called secret police, Gestapo, Nazis, and occupying force by people from all the way from local city council all the way to the governor. So to see now these same people who were at best silent last year and at worst encouraging of riots in the name of BLM and anti-fascism, now condemning the riots that happened in the Capitol, I have disbelief, but I can't say I'm I guess, surprised. It's what we have witnessed is the mainstream left in America becoming very, very comfortable with political violence. We shouldn't be surprised that other people of different political views are now of the belief that we resolve our disagreements through violence, apparently.
And Andy No, remember, it was a victim of violence at the hands of Antifa. They almost killed him. Just going back into last year, since Andy No brought us back there. Remember this from Kamala Harris, tweet on June 1st of 2020? If you're able to, chip in now to the Minnesota Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota.
And they burnt Minneapolis down to the ground.
Yeah, you don't get arrested for...
They set apartments on fire that people were still inside of them, Dan. Remember that?
Yeah, you don't get arrested for...
Sorry.
You don't get arrested for protesting. You get arrested for breaking the law. But I suppose we should look for the 1619 Project to launch a 1621 project to expunge all the statements made by Democrat socialists during 2020's Summer of Love, as Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin termed it. And by the way, just to reiterate, this is not whataboutism, because there's no excusing what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. This is called consistency with respect to peaceful protest as distinguished from violence. And that's the consistency that's been applied on this show throughout and will continue to be. And that's the consistency that's been applied by most conservatives throughout and will continue to be. And so I suppose it makes these statements from the likes of Kamala Harris, not to mention the ongoing purge, that much more difficult to countenance, doesn't it? For more on all of this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Salena Zito, Washington Examiner, New York Post, author of the bestseller, The Great Revolt. Salena, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Always a pleasure. And since you wrote this book, The Great Revolt, about Trump's election in 2016, one is wondering these days whether that great revolt in 2016 has been permanently put down by the established order.
So I don't think that in talking with Trump supporters and the aftermath of what happened Wednesday, I don't believe I see great evidence of people still holding the same sentiments about big corporation, big tech, big government, and how they are culturally disconnected from their needs and their lives and their communities. That does not mean that they are not just incredibly repulsed by what happened last Wednesday, and also very disappointed in the president, not just in what happened on Wednesday, but also after a couple of weeks continuing to say that the election was stolen. A lot of Trump supporters have told me, look, I'm sure there was incompetency and there was corruption, but there's never been enough evidence to show that it was enough to turn over any of the states that that he was unsatisfied with. And I've written about this since the election, where they've understood that Biden won. They've understood that Trump lost, but there was this sense of aspiration and hope that he'd do sort of a Grover Cleveland moment where he would come back and run again in 4 years, and or someone would take up the mantle. Now, after what happened on Wednesday, they just feel so dislodged from hope, because not only did some Trump supporters do something horrid, the reaction has been swift and merciless in boxing people in that ever supported him.
Well, yesterday I spoke to the one Trump supporter in my neighborhood who actually even had a sticker on his car, and he took the sticker off his car, was so upset. He said, I am so, after what happened, I'm not part of this anymore. I'm done. And he hated what Trump did to Vice President Mike Pence. He thought it was absolutely despicable what he did to him. And because what Pence did was he followed the Constitution. He didn't do anything wrong. He wasn't betraying Trump, but he just went along with the letter of the law.
And that is also something very consistent that I have heard from Trump supporters. Most of them have great respect for Mike Pence, have thought that he has been a loyal and calming voice during this administration, and were just absolutely repulsed by the president's tweet and the president's egging people on during that speech before, and they're just heartsick. The worst thing that people thought Trump supporters were, and Trump was, meaning their critics, all played out in a half an hour and ruined every good, tainted his legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although part of this is if you lie prone, they're not accepting surrender. They're going to roll over you. This is a group that is not taking prisoners, and so if you roll over and allow them to characterize you as just somebody else who, if you had been in D.C., you would have taken a selfie at Nancy Pelosi's desk too, without pushing back to that ridiculousness, that guilt by association, that painting with a broad brush, then that's exactly what they will do. They're not afraid to say things that are untrue. They're not afraid to engage in character assassination. They're not afraid to, as Bill McGurn argued in the Wall Street Journal, build on Hillary Clinton's half the Trump supporters are deplorables to now all the Trump supporters are deplorables, and they deserve whatever they get in terms of professional, personal, familial repercussions. And by the way, this, of course, is with big tech in tow. And I saw this tweet from Gateway Pundit, and again, forgetting the source for a second, look at the Standard. He tweeted, "They stole an election. Now they want silence. Now they want to silence anyone who questions the fraud." That was tagged by Twitter, of course. This claim of election fraud is disputed. Tweet cannot be replied to, retweeted, or liked due to a risk of violence. Due to a risk of violence. So here's where we're at. How people interpret content is the basis to censor content. And with social media platforms, frankly, being at least as, if not more powerful than the government culturally, that is a real change in American culture if we're going to abide that, in addition to all of the other sort of cancel culture, purge manifestations. So you can point to something and say that was bad, but that's not good enough for those on the left who are looking to score political points. And as Dan Henninger told me yesterday, looking to eliminate conservatives from politics, basically.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. You can the problem with what happened on Wednesday, and obviously there's multiple problems. People died, and our whole governing and laws was breached. Having said that, the reaction has been by not just the left, not just by Democrats, but also the cultural curators in the country, the people who control how we buy, how we are entertained, how we consume news, has been something to shudder at and something for people to be deeply concerned about. And all they have done is make things worse, no different than President-elect Biden's reaction of the day of, which was just to, again, his speech made things worse. He had a moment to draw people together, and instead he made it worse. And our cultural curators have done the exact same thing. I'm talking about big tech, big corporations, and so what that does is squeeze people. It alienates people. It isolates people. And we have seen the sort of repercussions of being squeezed and being isolated during a pandemic. You put that, you add that, with pressure from culture and pressure from governing, and you're creating a really big problem.
Well, big tech says, oh, it's not censorship. This is about safety, and we have to protect the people. But people that were at the rally that didn't even get arrested, we had a realtor here, Libby Andrews. She was fired for being at the rally. She wasn't arrested. She never stormed the Capitol. But that's how this has become like a communist state that we're living in, a communist country.
Well, before this even happened, cancel culture has become part of American culture. And people that supported Trump, we talked about the shy Trump voters. Well, there's a reason why they were shy, because of the potential backlash from either your job or your friends or your neighbors. If you put a Trump sign up or you told people how you felt, this is just making people go more underground. And I just don't think it is a level-headed approach to dealing with issues. And here's my biggest concern. Nobody is motivated to change.
Yes.
Nobody has any motivation to stop the divide, because corporations make money off of it. Politicians gain supporters from it. And so we are stuck we're at the beginning of the problem. We're not at the end of the problem, because nobody's motivated to bring people together.
And among the corporations you referenced, media specifically, Matt Taibbi writing at his site at Substack, we need a new media system. If you sell culture war all day, don't be surprised by the real world consequences. He writes, news companies now clean world events like whalers, using every part of the animal, funneling different facts to different consumers based upon calculations about what will bring back the biggest engagement kick. And so this is a culmination of what he's previously described. He actually called it the apotheosis of what he's previously described as the hate Inc. era. This is media companies that traffic in hate for profit.
Yeah, and this is a big theme throughout the book that I wrote with Brad Todd, in that these cultural curators, corporations, big tech, news organizations, government, bureaucracies, don't have people like you and me working in them. They don't have people that went to a state school or a community college, who grew up and was sitting in a pew every Sunday, or, own a gun, know how to use a gun, and actually know what the letters AR mean. And so when you have people that all think alike, don't understand the people that consume their products or consume their news or consume their entertainment, then you make bad decisions in terms of how you conduct your business. And the problems within these big corporations are from within. There's pressure from within. We saw it yesterday with Hallmark. I mean, Hallmark is like the most, on-American brand there is. And yesterday they decided to get involved in politics. And they're going to lose customers, but they believe it's worth the risk.
Salena Zito, Washington Examiner reporter, New York Post columnist, CNN contributor. The book, The Great Revolt, Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. Salena, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
In 1901, a woman by the name of Annie Taylor climbed into a barrel so that she could ride that barrel over Niagara Falls, the first person to do so. The reason for her crazy endeavor? She was struggling to make ends meet, and she was hoping for fame and financial security. It's Ryan from United Faith Mortgage, a faith and family mortgage team that tries to improve your financial outlook without having to ship you over a 170-foot waterfall. Our mortgage team happens to be an arm of a bigger company who is a direct lender, which means our company gets to use its own money and make its own decisions within its own walls. There's no middleman. This advantage often allows us to get you a better rate, which can save you monthly and lifelong money through a refinance, or help you with a cash-out refinance, cashing out some of your home's equity to use for life. We are United Faith Mortgage.
We pay your appraisal fees up to $500. That's out-of-pocket money.
United Mortgage Corp, Melville, New York. NMLS number 1330. Ryan Vrecka, NMLS number 65233. For all licensing information, go to nmlsconsumeraccess.org.
Hey, the winter, it's here, and frost levels go deeper into the ground. Have you thought about your basement? If you've experienced cracks in the basement walls or floors, interior walls, sticking doors or windows, gaps under the baseboard, or sagging floors, guess what? The expanding frozen soil pushing against your foundation walls will only make those problems get worse. And that's when you need to contact Permaseal Basement Systems by visiting permaseal.net. All too often, homeowners ignore these symptoms and then experience much bigger problems later on. So you can rely on an honest, accurate evaluation from Permaseal's trained experts, along with a permanent solution. For 41 years, they've been in business,